A monkey tool is a tool that has a drilled end that is the same size as a tenon. And a tenon is just something that looks like this. It's a round rod, and you would have another piece that is mortised that you would put on the end of here, and then this would rivet that other piece in place. So it's a way of joining metal that ends up with a really cool look, because that nice big rivet on the end of two pieces joined together can be very decorative, and you can even add something to the end of it to make it even more decorative. So what this tool does is it accepts this tenon so that you can dress these shoulders. It doesn't make the tenon, it doesn't dress the tenon, it dresses these shoulders. And if the shoulders aren't dressed properly, you're not going to get a snug fit when you join it to the mortise piece. This hole goes all the way through the piece, and that means the part that you slotted and drifted becomes a way out for any debris or water or anything that could get caught up in this hole. So that's a monkey tool. This is showing you that if the tenon can't snugly fit in there, you need to work the tenon out a little more using a guillotine tool or some other top and bottom fuller setup, because this tool, when hit this way, dresses these shoulders. We're going to start with mild steel in this case. So and that is what you would use for the leafing hammer, with the idea that you would case harden it. Mild steel for the monkey tool and mild steel for the leafing hammer is acceptable because of the way the tool's using. It's not being used under huge duress. Like when you make a leaf, it's usually really thin. So having a leafing hammer out of mild steel is fine. Having a monkey tool case hardened on the end to dress those shoulders can also be out of mild steel. You do not need to use anything hardenable for these purposes. So we got our 1-inch bar. You can probably try it with 3/4-inch bar to start if you wanted. That would be the smallest bar I would use for a monkey tool. The 1-inch would be great practice for the leafing hammer, but you're going to start by using, here's your slot punch. You're going to start by making a mark, and then you're going to check it. You want to make sure that you've got an equal distance on either side. You can correct that later, but it's better to just get it started fully in the middle. Have enough length here. I would recommend about 1.5 inches to get that started, so that you can make your other two ends of your monkey tool. And this also should be on a long bar still. This is shown just for photo purposes, already cut off. I would not cut this off till I've got it slotted and drifted. So once you've got your mark, you're ready to go. Keep your metal hot. You're going to put your slot punch back in your mark and hit it once or twice, and then you're going to quench it. You don't want this tool to get hot or lose its temper or its heat treatment. And you can do that by repeatedly quenching it. The other thing you're going to do is turn the tool and reinsert it, and that'll even out any unevenness you might have in the bottom of the tool. Take it, punch it all the way through to the bottom. When you hit the bottom, it's going to sound different and it's going to feel different. It'll have more of a thunk, and you'll feel it's harder. It's no longer moving, squishy metal. It's hit the top of the anvil. When you turn this bar over, there's going to be two things you're going to have already noticed. One is that this started to curl up as you go. So as you slot through there, you're going to be removing this frequently to quench it. Turn it over every once in a while to keep it straight, to keep that curl from happening. That curl is going to come up and make these two sides meet, which will capture your tool. If that happens, and it might, that's why you practice, is turn this whole thing up, rest in this edge and this edge on the post vise, and just try to knock that back out by knocking this straight again. So once you've got the tool to the bottom, turn it over. Might need to flatten it a little bit, but you're going to see an outline of where this hit the bottom of the metal. Use that as your guide to punch back through the other side. And the color at this point, you need to have like a bright red to orange, but it doesn't have to be super, super hot because you want it to shear off at that point. Once that's done, the little slug should pop out on the other side and you're ready to drift. If you've done that a couple times and you're feeling good about it, another thing you can try is only punching halfway through and then turning it over, using the swelling that happens on the side and the fact that you know you started in the middle as your guide to punch halfway through. So punch halfway through one side, turn it over, match that up using the swelling marks as your guide, line it back up to where you know it started on the other side and punch halfway through, and then the slug is going to meet in the middle. And what that'll do is even out the swelling that happens. This was punched all the way through and then back punched once you reach the bottom. And you can see the swelling here is more than the swelling here. It dragged the metal through and widened it more on what was the bottom than it did on the top. So 2 ways to punch through, but definitely recommend starting with the all the way to the bottom the first couple or even several times you do this. So once you have your hole and your slug is out of the way, you're ready to drift this. So insert the drift into the hole, and you should have made your drift first and then made your slot punch to match the end of that drift. So with the drift in place, you're going to move it all the way through till you got the rounded ends, the working bit of business in the middle of the tool that you're making, the monkey tool. Flatten your sides, and that'll allow the monkey tool to rest flat no matter which way you're holding it. At that point, you can push the drift all the way through, reheat this, push it back through the other way, and dress the sides again and push it, hammer it back through the hole. Once you have this hole nice and cleaned up, straighten out any curling that might have happened or any distortion, and then you can set down your struck end, which is just like any struck end on the other tools that I talked about, and that is a slight taper, chamfer the sides. That helps you with your taper, and it's not going to be a true octagon. You're going to have wider sides where you started, but then file off and dome this end, because remember, we want a lot of flat line options to hit so we don't jar this when we're using it. So let's watch that punch and drift happen. Notice it's on a long bar being held between the smith's legs, quenching frequently so as to not lose the heat treatment on the end of that slot punch. Turn it over. You're going to need to straighten that bar as you go. And this is an example of showing you how to use these sides to punch halfway through, turn it over, straighten it, and then start punching halfway through the other side. And then the slug is going to come out in the middle. It won't be as thin as if you pushed it all the way through. Put the drift in the hole, and notice this back and forth motion. Take that drift, hitting it one side on their side of the hardy hole and one side on the other side of the hardy hole. I'm gonna just back that up. So you're going to move it back and forth so you don't distort this. You can see that if I just hit this here and it was left on the far side of this hardy hole, eventually you're going to get an outline of your hardy hole on the other side of this, and it's going to push that material down in there. By sliding it back and forth, you're going to minimize any of that happening. Let me get this video started again. Then you can dress your sides once you've got the working bit in there. And then if you remove the tool like that and you set it on the side, it makes it really easy. I'm going to show you that again. It makes it really easy to pick up. So we didn't push it all the way through. We moved it from the same side we went in and then set it on the edge of the anvil, flipped this around and reinserted it. That way you're evening out the hole from both sides, and this is really good practice for when you're doing a hammer. So if you start that now, it's a nice way to have this all set up. And the main reason why you want this all set up is this is hot. You do not want to pick this up with your hand. You might, but I think you'll only do it once, because now, even though this hasn't got any color to it, that's hot. It was in this hot piece of metal long enough to suck up some of that heat. You can cut off the end, and that cut off end will get you started on this tapered end for the struck end, leaving the fresh side untouched. So cut it off from all four sides in a hardy cutoff, and you'll have this taper started. But there is the start of your monkey tool. Now it's just a matter of finding the center, and you can find the center by crossing the diagonals of the square, center punch that, drill all the way through to the required size. And the size is whatever size you want your tenon to be. I would recommend starting with a 1/4 inch and going up a 1/16 of an inch to a 1/2 inch. You're going to want to practice this punching and drifting a couple times, and that'll give you 5 different sized monkey tools. And if you go beyond that, that's fine. It never hurts to have more than one monkey tool. Notice that the inner edge of the drilled hole is also chamfered, and you could do that with just a bigger bit in your drill. Now you're going to want to dome this, because having the middle higher than the sides will allow the tenon or the seat of the tenon to have some concavity to it, which will keep the mortise piece from high centering on the end of that. So here is some pictures using a John Williams. This is a Guildworks hammer, nice hammers. The monkey tool in use. So the tenon is inserted all the way in, hit the end, hold on to this, turn the bar 90 degrees, hit the end, Same thing, all four sides, or as many times as you need to get this properly dressed. When you put this in here, it's gonna suck up heat, so you might need to reheat this a couple times. Oh, and the end of this monkey tool, it might be helpful to case harden it so that you get a little longer life out of it. So there you go. There's your slot punch and drift in use, and more tools made in the process. Yes.
Quick question. How long is the monkey tool?
Oh, well, if this is 1 inch, I would say this is like another 1.25 inches and another 1.25 inches. So how long is that? 3.5 inches. I should have brought up one of my monkey tools. It's not, you just want enough here to have a slight taper on the end. I don't know that there's a prescribed length. And you want this long enough to accept your tenon, and but you know, not so long that you can't drill all the way through it.
Makes sense. Now, an even better question. Why is it called a monkey tool?
Because they were monkeying around when they made it. I have no idea why it's called a monkey tool. In fact, it confused me to no end, because I'm like, what is a monkey tool when I first started? I don't know that, you know, I'm going to see if I can find an answer for that. Monkey tool. Why? Why, oh, why? There's probably some explanation.
No bananas.
Okay. Any other questions?
That was it for right now.
Okay, awesome. So now we're at 7:36, so we've got some more time. I've got a couple other things lined up here for you, just in case we had extra time. Normally I like to quit about 1:15, but I'll show you this next little bit of business. The simple bottom fuller and top fuller. This is anytime you want to make a symmetrical indentation. It's also a great start to a tenon, which I already talked about, and it can be used instead of a guillotine tool. And it's fairly simple to set up. A top fuller is just a handheld fuller that looks a lot like your chisel point or your slot punch, only it's got a rounded edge to whatever prescribed width you want. You would have different sizes of top fullers depending on your need, and you would file or belt grind this off so that it was nice and smooth and these corners were smooth. And I have a little video of a top fuller being made. So a pretty thick chisel point taper that you would leave fairly thick. And I don't like them to get too wide. I have one here. I don't know that I've ever measured it. It's probably about 3/4 of an inch wide. And that's all you need to do, is to put a chisel point taper and do all the other steps. Just follow that back up, anneal it, dress your edges. I typically use a belt grinder for that. I suppose you could also use a rasp if you didn't have a belt grinder. And you've got your top fuller. To match that, you could just make this simple bottom fuller. So let's say the top one was 3/8 of an inch wide, and you had 3/8 of an inch wide material. You could just bend these ends so that it lies flat on the anvil. And here's one being made. Pretty simple stuff. Just bending, again, over air. You're not forging. And you just want to make it so that it lies flat on the anvil. And so, you know, get out that height that's over there, and you do that by turning this over and hitting it right on the middle part there. And then it'll lie flat on your anvil. And that allows you to do this. Now you've got indentations happening evenly on both sides. You're going to get a little more penetration from the hammer side, so always turn it over and do it evenly. And then it's just a matter of dressing the end to whatever shape you want. But having those fullers to start with gets you nice, crisp, evenly centered shoulders. Now, I said that you could use this to make a tenon, and it would be used the same way to start, but then the opposite of this. You would draw this out to the tenon. You'd also probably have something different than flat bar, like start with a 1/2 inch or something that was square or round, whatever was needed for your project. So that's the top and bottom fullers. So now that you've got that under your belt, I'm going to show you a video of a round punch solely because it's just a round taper. So anytime you're going from making something round, even if it starts round, you go to square, draw that down to at least 1/4 inch. That would all depend on what size you wanted your punch, but you're going to go to square and then octagon and then to round. The key to getting this really nice and round is getting this part right here, very even square sides. Once you have your even square sides, you take it to octagon, and be very careful when you hit that end because it'll go flat really fast. Even octagon on all sides, keeping that tool straight, which again is more about how you hold it than anything. And once you've got even octagons, you can continue to knock down, I just call it knocking down the lines, and it moves to round fairly quickly because round is just nothing more than a series of flat surfaces. When you get to this point, you're using planishing blows and you don't want to hit the same spot twice. So you're turning the tool and getting that nice round edge. And now you could take it over to the post vise and file that clean and round. So if I have a round punch, maybe I want a round drift. A round drift is going to be much smaller. Here's a round drift in use. And a round drift can either be outfitted on the insertion end to accommodate a slot punch or a round punch. To make a round drift, you're going to start with a piece of round bar the size of your intended hole. But the thing you're going to want to think about is that as the metal cools, it contracts. So the tool's going to contract, which this is your tool, and the hole is going to contract. So you want to thicken this middle at least 3 to 4.5%, which is roughly 4 hammer blows. And that should get you the right amount of upset. If you want to be perfectly exact, become friends with a machinist because they will help you calculate the right amount that the metal contracts upon cooling. And it's this amount that you're going to want to know exactly how much you need to upset the drift. Once you're ready to work this, you're going to heat this whole piece and then you're going to cool both ends. Hold on with rivet tongs to the short end, which will end up being your struck end, and that will help you keep it in mind as you go forward working this piece. So hold on to the tongs when you quench them on this end so that you're not sucking the heat out of the middle, because then you're going to take it over to the anvil and you're going to hit it on top 4 times, turn it over 4 times, and that'll get you the right amount of thickness in the middle. The upset is not in the middle of the bar. It's going to be this is the struck end, the short end, and the working end or the insertion end is going to be made longer. So you really want this upset on the far end, and by holding the tongs in this particular way, you can keep track of where that is. Now it's a matter of making the struck end, which is exactly the same. It's just not going to take as much because, again, this is whatever size your hole is, be it 3/8 or 1/2 inch. You're going to make the lazy square, octagon, and then you're going to flip it around and make a long tapered end. When you make the long tapered end, you want to make sure you don't touch the thickened middle, but you take it up to that end and you knock down all your corners. If you don't knock down your corners, you could end up with a situation where corner to corner is wider than this upset middle that you so carefully put together. So want to knock down these edges to that thickening so that you don't end up with kind of a false drift size or a drift size you don't intend. So let's watch a video of that happening. So we're holding on to what's going to become the struck end and then turning around so that we make the struck end with the thickening towards that side. So this is our tapered end, and we're going to draw that down to a pretty long taper. So go ahead and work it on the Bic and you'll move the material a little faster. And then notice you're going to take this up to a long taper and make sure that you knock those corners down so that you don't create a wider area on the square part. So there you go. You would not heat treat this. In fact, I think you could even use mild steel. In fact, that's what I do. And the round punch, however, you would want to heat treat. So now you can use that struck end and what you've learned about making hand tools for whatever your project needs. So here's a eye drift for a horse, a top fuller for a mane. Here is a little punch I made for my Hula Girl bottle opener, and you make a little flower on one end, and this is just a little crescent for the belly button, and a bob punch, which is just a big round kind of a ball on the end for the bottle opener part. So whatever your project requires, you can make yourself a hand tool for that. This eye punch and this crescent, little half crescent here, I made by heating the tool. Well, I got the tapered end on there, and then I heated that and put it in the post vise upright, and I just used a center punch to make a hole in the middle, and then filed this to the outside shape I wanted. I filed off the other half of the circle for the crescent for the belly button. In fact, this tool, I think, has already reached the end of its life. I like to have one end a little thicker than the other, and that's already gone. Although I don't know how many belly buttons I've punched. So anyway, that is the end of my prepared material. So we did a scrolling wrench, chisel, slot punch, drift, monkey tool, brown punch, drift, and then whatever your requirement is.